All right, this is Patriots Corner Podcast here. I am DJ Matt. What's going on? We are going to introduce today former Navy SEAL Steve Prescia. Steve, what's going on?
Hey, Matt, how are you, man?
Everything's going great. I'm happy to have you on the show. I'm glad we could do this. So, Steve, I want to give a little bit more of an intro for you because you have done so much. During your military career, you spent 10 years in the SEAL teams, and on top of that, you did private security for DynCorp. You protected the Afghanistan president, did you not? Right?
Yes, that's correct, Matt.
Wow, that is amazing. So, Steve, I want to take it back real quick because there's got to be, the lead up to all this success, it had to start someplace. And I want to ask you, where did it all begin? What made you want to aspire to be a Navy SEAL?
That's a great question. So there was a lot of legacy in my family. I had three uncles that were in the Army during Vietnam War. I had an uncle that was in Korean War. My grandfather was in World War II as a paratrooper. My brother was in the Army as well. So I was the first out of the family to actually join the Navy. So I always knew that I wanted to join the military at some point in my young adult years, just because, and just like some of the other guys, I'm sure this is a similar story. I grew up in a pretty tough life, pretty tough family. I lost my dad at an early age. Mom had to work, quite a bit. Went to school and worked at the same time to support me and my three brothers. So I worked since I was 12 years old. And education, unfortunately, was not the primary focus for all of us. We were basically just in a survival mode. So we did whatever we can to support my mom and the family, but also, just to support ourselves. So unfortunately, after high school, I didn't have a lot of options. So I did a lot of manual labor soon after high school, and I did it for 2 years. And I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, this isn't working for me, and this is not what I want to do. And the people I hung out with weren't really adding any value to my life. So that's when I really buckled down and, took an interest more in a military life. So I went to the Navy's office, the recruiting office. They showed me an old VHS recruiting video of the SEAL program, and I looked over at the recruiter and I said, "That's what I want to do." And from there, I don't know what it was, but the switch was just turned on, and I never looked back. And leading up to that, I definitely was in good shape. However, I was not. And I really would like to demystify, and you and I had this conversation before leading up to this, is that, these guys are just regular people, that have obviously different drive, different motivation, and a different mindset. And, they operate a little bit differently. But, I was by no means a great athlete. I played some sports in school, but unfortunately I didn't have the support of the family, and, we didn't have the financial resources to really focus on that. So I played baseball for a few years. I ran track for a few years as well. And, I worked out often. So the motivation or the drive definitely was something that I had that I think was a little bit different. The intensity was a little bit different than some of my peers. So when I made up my mind to become a SEAL, there was no looking back. I mean, if I wasn't running every day, I was working out, doing bodyweight calisthenics in the basement, running on a treadmill if it was cold outside. So, I mean, that was kind of the initial, seed that was planted in the training leading up to it. And then once I joined and went into the Navy, I was on that right path, and I was damned if something like a physical screen test was going to stop me from moving forward. So I hope does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question perfectly. I just want to jump back real quick to when you went and saw that old video. Was the glory of the video once you got to Buds? And obviously, I'll ask you about your military life before Buds. But when watching that video, what was really going through your head? I know you said it turned the switch on, and from then on out, it was just focus from there. But What was it like watching that video? Did you just say to yourself, I want that to be me one day? I want to be able to say I'm doing what they're doing in that video.
Well, I just always had a personality of never settling for something, so joining the military wasn't enough. I already knew in my head that I wanted to join the military. Anything that I ever did, if I played baseball, I didn't want to just be on the field. I wanted to be the pitcher, or I wanted to play shortstop. I wanted to be in a challenging position. So I don't know what it was, but for some reason, I knew that just joining the military wasn't enough for me, and I wasn't going to be satisfied. So when I saw that, and I noticed, just some of the stuff looked amazing to me. As far as here was a guy that was in the military, but he was doing something that was only people dreamed of doing. But I saw this as an opportunity to really have a huge impact on my life, but also really enjoy it. And I knew just from talking to the recruiter that this was a challenge like no other. And he told me that most guys don't even make it through. Well, for some reason, that inspired me even more, and that drove my, motivation even more as well. And I'll parlay it into, so my stepdad was in the Navy, and he was a big guy from Georgia. I mean, he was like 6'3", 240 pounds, and, he's a very physical guy. And I was, 5'8", 160 pounds, so not a very big guy. He told me I can never do it and I would never make it. Well, I think that helped me tremendously, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people, it either can demotivate you or motivate you even more. And for some reason, by him telling me that motivated me even more.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to hear because, like you said, how everyone's story would tie in, and they do, and that's why I feel you guys are such an elite group, because everybody, going through, or, who passes BUD/S and goes on to become a Navy SEAL, they all never settle for anything. And is that something that you feel you have to grasp early, and you have to have it early in order to get through BUD/S? Because I know you're a SEAL mentor as well, which I think is so awesome.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that was probably, and just to clear it up, so I did 10 years, as a SEAL. However, only 6 of those were active duty and 4 were reserve. So part of my, so I would say all of my career, adult career, professional career, was in some capacity in naval special warfare. So like you said, my last 10 years was the Naval Recruiting District, New York, mentor for all candidates that wanted to become 5 different Warrior Challenge jobs, which was SEAL, EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, Diver, Special Boat Unit, and Air Rescue. So that's where I really learned, as far as like the warrior mindset, so to speak, because we live the lifestyle, but when you really start, leading other people or mentoring younger candidates, you really understand what it, you would like to think that you understand what it takes to make it through the program. But like some of these other guys on your podcast said, you could be a guy coming from a really tough background, and you can be a guy also coming from a very, well-to-do background, and both guys will make it through. So there are some things in there that, you just don't know whether or not, these are all the components to actually make it through the program, like mental toughness, like physical, like having some adversity in your life. And, but some guys will surprise you every time. But you definitely, when we have these candidates show up and we train them, there are certain things that we're looking for, just simple things of having, they're showing up on time. They fit well within the other teammates. They're helping each other out often. They're constantly looking to improve. They're very competitive. So these are all like traits that we're looking for in some of these guys, and at least have some kind of baseline, before we start training them.
Now, let me ask you this. How you're saying, you kind of get a feel for what these, young guys, who they are, what they're about. Do you see a lot of, gritty, kind of tough kids coming in and, as comparison to somebody who might not be? Or what kind of guys do come and speak with you?
Well, it's the average age is approximately 22, right? And then I grew up in Long Island, New York, and I was mentoring the majority of, I would say like 75% of my time was training candidates in Long Island, New York. So, just like anywhere else in the world, you're going to have areas that are very rich areas, very white collar, and then you're going to have some areas that are blue collar. So we had a pretty mixed bag all the time. If I would say, what are the majority of the guys that had adversity in their life and came from a blue collar job and they had to work, as a young adult, we had quite a few of those guys. And some of them did really well, and some of them did really poorly. And the great thing about my job is that I wasn't a coach, training kids to play sports. And I didn't have parents coming to the training site and overseeing the training and making sure that I treated their kids well. A lot of the kids came on their own. I would say more than 90% of them always came on their own, and their parents never were involved whatsoever. And these kids, they knew the rules. They knew the guidelines of the program, the standards that they had to uphold. And if they didn't, I would tell them to grab their stuff and go home and get out of there.
Yeah.
And it was an awakening for most of them, because probably nobody's ever been able to tell them that, or no one's told them that as a teacher or a coach before. So it was a real kind of moment where they had to kind of reevaluate what their motivation was and why they were there, and whether or not they had it. Or have what it takes to continue to train there, because our programs are not easy. Even as a candidate before he leaves from boot camp, our standards are really tough. Therefore, the guys who don't fit in well within a group, they don't train well within, teams, they don't understand authority or respect authority, these mentors, they don't put up with that, and they send them home.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny too how you say, no parents coming to oversee, which I completely agree with. If anything, those young guys are in the best hands that they could be in. But I almost picture as if you'd be dealing with an angry soccer mom or something like that. It'd be like a
no room
Comedy
for
Central
that.
bit.
That's just not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And any parent that want to question yourself or anyone else is obviously crazy. So let you jump over to the military side. So through high school, you still want to always go into the military. What were the first steps? What did you go right into buds or the screening test, or did you start somewhere else in the Navy?
Well, so back then, you had to have a source rating in order to be eligible to even try out for the SEAL program. So I joined in 92. And in 92, you had to pick one of, let's say, 20 jobs. Mine was signalman. The reason why I picked signalman, well, one, it was a source rating that gave me the opportunity. And two, it was only 5 weeks long, which means my path to becoming a SEAL or going to BUDS was a lot sooner. So I joined, got my signalman contract, went to boot camp, and back in the day, in the 90s, they would come to the pool and they'd ask who wanted to be a Navy diver or a SEAL or whatever it was, one of the Warrior Challenge programs. And I raised my hand. Soon after that, I had to schedule to take the PST in boot camp. And the funny thing is that the PST is not a difficult test. Swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and the run. Not long distances, and the standards are not too high. They're not really that attainable as long as you practiced and you trained on your own.
Of course,
you got there.
Yeah, I know that. I've looked them up, and every job within the Navy dealing with special warfare, the screening tests are a lot of them are very similar. Am I wrong with that, or?
Yeah, just the standards are a little bit different. So
Okay.
like the push-ups might be higher for SEAL than diver, or the run might be faster for SEAL than EOD or something like that. But they're all, the thing is, it's really easy to underestimate the test, because if you haven't trained for it, it's pretty challenging, because now you don't just pass the test and get a contract. You actually have to be competitive and be selected by the program managers.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it is,
So
yeah,
the
it's a
standards are
selection
high.
process. Well, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying. So I've watched this program, the mentor program, because I started in 2007. I just recently resigned a month ago. So the changes for this mentor program have been tremendous. As far as the standards are a lot higher, the training is a lot more difficult. It's great as far as leading up to training, and it's progressive. It's very complete as far as making sure that these guys are strong and durable before they get there. All the programs after boot camp or have gotten better through time. I mean, you go to the prep course now after boot camp, you got top swimmers, top strength coaches, runners. I'm talking collegiate athletes and sometimes Olympic athletes training these candidates before they go to BUDS or whatever program they're going into. And they're going into an 8-week sports camp, so to speak. So they're doing 2-a-days, 5 days a week for 8 weeks straight. They have mental toughness classes, nutrition classes, injury prevention, injury maintenance. It's great. I mean, they're basically have taken on the idea of like a Division I NCAA program or like professional athletes.
Wow. So you go through that, and what happens next after that? You then you get selected, or then you go to a preparatory, or
So, I mean, now the program's different than when I went through. So I'll just back it up a little bit. So when I went through, you took the PST in boot camp. If you passed it, you were given this opportunity on paper to go and retest the PST while you're in your A school. So mine was signalman. So while I was in the signalman A school, I had to retake the PST to keep the same standards, pass it, and continue on the same path. Once I finished A school, they would send us to temporary duty awaiting orders to go to SEAL training. So myself and like 15 other candidates work in administrative department, training together, with no mentor or no coach, but just working out together before workday and usually after as well. And then once our orders came up, we would depart for our schoolhouse, and mine was SEAL. So if you fast forward to now, what's going on is they're training with a mentor for approximately 6 months before they leave for boot camp. And usually they get an opportunity to train, at least in New York, was like twice a week with a mentor. And then they would leave for boot camp, and they would be in a special division with SEAL candidates just like them. They would train every morning together and carry out, the normal duties of a Navy boot camp candidate. And then soon after that, after 8 weeks is up, they would go to a prep course, which is just across the street from boot camp, and go through another 8 weeks, but that one's focused on, mostly the preparatory school for BUDS, which is the swimming, the running, strength training, injury prevention, and everything else, like I mentioned before. And you have standards all throughout that you have to pass. And if you don't pass those standards anytime throughout training, you're dropped from the program.
wow.
So you generally start with about 200 candidates. They usually don't lose much in prep course, which is approximately 20. And like Ray Kerr said in his podcast, there has to be a little bit of luck involved. Well, a lot of guys get hurt, unfortunately. Some bodies, just can't handle all the stress of all the training. Some get injuries that they just can't recover in time to continue on. Some, unfortunately, have, hardship within the family. So, yeah, so they move on from the prep course, they go over to their schoolhouse, and that's when, like they say, that the hammer drops. That's when training really begins. And that's when they really start seeing the attrition. You go from a class of 180 to 200 down to 80 within a week or two.
Wow. So when you got through all the beginning steps, what was it like once you got to BUDS? That had to be just, if I'm sure you remember too, which I think is so cool, is that everything about the stuff before, you guys always remember it, step by step. So your first day What was that like? Was it immediately, drop and let's go? Like, let's start going, let's get moving. There's no time for BS, I guess I'll say on this. But what was that like, your first day at Buds?
You know, there's a lot of anxiety or stress leading up to getting there because you just want to get to the show, so to speak. You want to get the training. You've been hearing so much about it. You've been reading so much about it. You've been talking it over with your buddies for so long, and you're just like, okay, let's get this over with and let's do this. So I was excited, and I really enjoyed the environment, the competitiveness. I knew I wasn't the strongest and the fastest, but I knew that I was dedicated, more than some of the guys that I met there. Now, it's easily, you can be intimidated when you first show up there. You're all lined up, sometimes facing each other. These guys, everybody's in a pair of the UDT shorts, and you got these guys that are just, they look like Olympic athletes, 6'2", 220 pounds, and just like chiseled. So you can get intimidated, being a guy that was fairly small at 5'8", 160 pounds. Everybody's sizing each other up. But once the game starts, you start seeing that there's a lot of guys out there that they don't belong there. And to be honest with you, it was confusing to me why they were there and why they thought this was going to be easy. And as a young man, I was only 20 years old going through. I was very immature. I wouldn't say I was a very mature 20 years old, so I had a lot to learn. But there was no doubt, and even in my peers' perspective, that I had me quitting me. But you would slowly start seeing these guys quitting from evolutions that were really not that difficult. So to be honest with you, my motivation went up even more. Did the instructors put some fear into us and, increase the intensity once you got there? Absolutely. And it was intense, by the most intensity I've ever experienced in my life. But I welcomed it. I didn't expect anything less. And to be honest with you, when I would talk to some of my candidates that went over there and they felt they were unprepared, or, they didn't realize it was going to be so tough, I'm so confused when people tell me that, because everybody knows that this program is one of the toughest, in the world to go through, and that the numbers show the attrition is extremely high. So I welcomed it, and I really enjoyed it. It was extremely difficult and it was exhausting, but once you made it through each week by week and you saw the class go from a size of 180 to 80 and then 60, for some reason I just felt like I belonged there, and it was the only place I wanted to be at the time.
Wow, that is so cool to hear. I would imagine, it gets to the point to where you see people leaving, week by week in large groups, yet you're still there. You're still grinding out, going through the pain, and it's not breaking you yet. Now, did you ever have a point, through Buds where you wanted to call it quits, or because you guys go through so much, the training is insane. It's amazing, how much you guys do.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember this day like it was yesterday, and you can beat yourself up about it, but I think every man has a breaking point, and I think every guy in my class, I hope every guy in my class kind of had that moment as well at some point in training. And it necessarily doesn't have to be Hell Week. It could have been somewhere in dive phase, during pool competition. It could have been something in land warfare, where the stress was on the shooting range. But for me, you're right. I had I came to that breaking point, and I made a decision. And for me, it was in Hell Week. And I got to Wednesday night, and every night they do an inspection to make sure every guy, is doing okay medically. So the doc would look everyone over individually while your peers are outside, getting hosed down with some cold water and experience and the love from the instructors out there. So you go into the doctor's office and he asks you a bunch of questions. He looks over your body and, he says, all right, you're good to go and get back out there. Well, the night before, we did something called rock portage. And rock portage is an evolution you do as a boat crew. And you're in these inflatable boats, and you got to land on these rocks and portage yourself over the rocks and onto the beach. Soon after that, getting beat up by the instructors, you had to go back out into the ocean. So me and my teammates were heading back out towards the ocean, and they tell you never leave the boat. So I had my hand on the handle of that boat the whole time. Never let go of the boat, they always told you. So the wave came in and pushed the boat along with me holding on to it. And all I remember is just blacking out because there was a huge boulder behind me that was in the rock or in the water. And that wave pulled us into those rocks. And I remember just kind of like coming to and being, you have a flotation device on, thank God. But so bottom line, my back went into that boulder, and I thought I was done.
Wow. So you literally collided with the boulder.
Yeah. So there was, it was nasty. I mean, it was a really tough evolution, and there was a real high propensity for getting hurt. Some guys were getting hurt during these evolutions. So there is a lot of luck involved. So I kind of shook it off. I was able to regain, control and strength, and I got back in the boat and I started paddling. But man, did it hurt. And it stayed with me for a little while. So running was difficult. Carrying the boat on my head was difficult. But I was at Wednesday. Everybody says you got to make it to Wednesday. You got to make it to the hump of the week. And, most of the guys, like 80%, don't quit after that. So that's all I had in my head the whole time. So Wednesday on the inspection, I told the doctor about what happened. And he looked at my back and he palpated, and felt all the bones in my spine. He said, you're okay. He goes, you got two options. You can either stay here and quit, or you can get back out with your team and continue on. So I sat there and thought about it for a minute, and then I gathered my stuff and I ran back out there with my team.
Wow. Now was it cut and dry when he said that?
Say again?
Was it cut and dry when he said that? Or, I'm envisioning this doctor, did he say completely cut and dry as if you could stay here and quit or you could get, back out there? Did he ever give any hint?
That's how it is out there. If you don't have a physical injury that's debilitating that he can physically see, because think about it, they don't have time to do a thorough medical inspection for every candidate. So, they're looking for extreme injuries. They don't have time to take you into the doctor's office and give you an MRI. So if they can see that you can walk, they can see that you don't have any, physical deformities or you're not like bleeding profusely, he thinks you can get back out there and continue on because they've been doing this for a long time and they have a good gauge of whether or not you can continue on or, maybe you're just shaken up mentally. Every guy is hurting physically, and that's the understanding is that everybody in my boat crew, maybe not hurting as much as I am right now, but I'm sure they're still going through some physical pain.
Yeah. Wow. So when you hit the finish line and you went to your bud's graduation, what was the feeling like then?
Oh, it was amazing. I'll tell you, like Bud's graduation, that's just, congratulations, continue on to more training. But the SQT graduation, when you actually get your trident, you get your pin, there's nothing like it. I remember looking at that thing and just being speechless. I felt such a sense of accomplishment. I was definitely felt like that was, the moment in my life where, things were going to change. And I was proud more than anything, whether it came to athletics, whether it came to any other achievements in my life, that was it.
Wow. Now, once you graduated and you got your trident, because I know you guys have, one of the strongest brotherhoods within the military and all over the country. Did you, friendships with SEALs who went through and became SEALs before you. Did you start meeting? I mean, obviously within your team, but did you kind of get to deal and speak with people who were SEALs before you were?
No, unfortunately, I didn't have that luxury. There wasn't a lot of SEALs out there. The first SEAL I ever met was in boot camp when they gave me the opportunity to take the test.
Wow.
So there was no mentor program. There was no coaching. The only thing I knew was just the books that I've read about Vietnam and some of the information you saw on, well, there was no online back then, but just what happened in the first Gulf War, in the newspaper. So, yeah, I really didn't have anything to go off of. I didn't have any gauge. I didn't have a coach. I had to teach myself the combat side stroke. I worked out. And to be honest with you, my training probably wasn't the best training leading up to it, but that just goes to show you talk to a lot of SEALs, and a lot of guys will tell you it's not all physical, because it's not. I mean, you obviously need to be in great shape, but you don't need to be a super athlete, and you don't need a SEAL to coach you. However, they do have those programs now that you can take advantage of, which is great.
Yeah, that is amazing. Now, after you got your trident, what was life for you right after you became a United States Navy SEAL? What was next?
Well, you go right to a team and you start operating. So, I mean, I did a few overseas deployments. During that time, there was no war going on, so mostly it was just training. We did a lot of foreign internal defense, so training other forces overseas. We worked around the clock. We worked really hard. And in the 90s, we didn't have the technology that they have today. So it was more of the unconventional, warfare like from our forefathers. We learned from, map and compass. We learned from, we started implementing GPSs, but, we really used the fundamentals of everything from navigation to tactics to, we had some of the older weapons as well. But yeah, mostly it was just training and foreign internal defense, long deployments, coming back and starting it all over again. So for me, because there wasn't a war going on, and not that I welcomed it, but it was just like anything else. You train for something for so long, and you put so much effort and so much, time into it. You want to be able to, put those skills to the test. So that's when I got out. After 6 years of not, getting an opportunity, to practice those skills on the battlefield, I felt like I was getting into that, that training cycle over and over again, and that's generally what it is. Which is great, if you embrace that life or that lifestyle. But I felt like I was ready to move on to something else. So soon after that, after I got out, I stayed in the reserves, which was awesome because that brotherhood, it continues. And I was still assigned to SEAL Team 1, which was my active duty team as well. And we provided a direct support for the active duty guys.
Wow. So, it's awesome to hear, you guys say that. And I've heard a few other interviews, other Navy SEALs will say the same thing. You train so much, you learn so much, and you want to put it to the test. Now, after that, you did go and put it to the test. I'm reading, and right after you then started doing private security, right?
Yes, yeah. So that was an opportunity that most of the guys, when they were out or in the reserves, it was an opportunity to go overseas. One, it was, to go to war and be a part of that brotherhood and really, practice those skills on the battlefield. It paid well, which is obviously another great thing. And I got an opportunity working with DynCorp. DynCorp had a great mission that was a Department of State contract, And most of the guys on my team were all special forces, whether it was Army, we had Rangers, we had Force Recon, we had some Army snipers, we had quite a few SEALs, we had Delta Force. So these were a great group of guys. And, we provided protection for Hamid Karzai everywhere he went. And they had a convoy team, which is the team that I was on. I was one of the drivers. They had a sniper team, and then they had a close protection team. So everywhere he went, we provided the protection for him, during the Afghanistan campaign. And I was there from January of 2003 until October of 2003. And it was a great experience. I had a lot of, good times working with some really high-speed, motivated special operations guys.
Wow. Now, and I know you guys can't go into detail, obviously, when it comes to missions and operations that were conducted, but what was it like being over there, giving him, the president, this type of protection, especially in 2003, when that's when stuff had already heated up, when it was only heating up more in the Middle East, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a new mission for us, because as a SEAL coming out the time that I was there, we didn't have any protection training. So we actually went through a Department of State. It was a 3-week course, basically taught you the basics of personal protection. You trained with your group of, teammates that were going to deploy together. And most of the guys, they were taking guys who were proven, through their military background. And that's all they accepted was special operations. So, they already knew they had a great product. They just wanted to, it was a different mission, make sure everybody was on the same page. And it wasn't very challenging, I got to say, because we had such a great team. The guys who were leading the charge on this mission were the Delta Force. And the Delta Force guys, this is the first opportunity I ever get a chance to work with these guys, and I was very impressed. They had a lot of experience. They were a little bit older. They knew the mission. They knew it well, and they provided some great leadership. So we were in good hands. We kind of just, let them lead, and we provided, whatever position that we had in the detail. Did we have some times where, there was some threats? Absolutely. There were. But, these guys they really were good at what they did. And it was great because we all worked really good together. There still was that level of competitiveness. Therefore, it brought up everybody's, intensity within the job, and we took it seriously. And we never had an incident while deployed overseas, guarding them. So, we came back unscathed, and so did he. And it was a successful mission, and someone else took it on from there.
Now, if I can ask you this question, with all the training you guys do go through, especially, before going over to these countries where they're, like you said, threats could pop up here and there out of no place, did you guys kind of know what to look for? For example, if somebody was, using a cell phone or et cetera, stuff that you see on the news and in film, did you guys know what to look for even before coming in interaction with a person over in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, it was a learning curve. And again, the leadership that we had, we spent a lot of time prepping for every movement. And we had this down to a science. The convoy team, we had an advance party that would go and clear the location before the president would get there. And they had a specific way of conducting business to ensure his safety on his arrival. So we had all the resources necessary. We provided, like 5 fully armored Humvees. So our presence alone was a deterrent. IEDs obviously is a threat, and it's still one of the biggest threats overseas. And it's hard to combat that. It really is. Thank God that we didn't have any incident, that came up like that. But yeah, we had like I said, if you have good leadership, the mission usually is successful. Obviously there has to be some luck involved, but we continually trained. If we weren't providing protection for some, let's say, mission that we had to go on in order to keep him safe, we were out on the range training, or we were in the classroom talking about how we can become better.
Wow. Now, during that time spent in private security, did you ever come across active SEALs and work with them as well?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't work with them too often because our mission was a little bit different. It does happen, I would say, with other details. There is some interoperability, I guess you can say, working with other groups. Like, for example, like when he would meet with the Prime Minister or the Ministry of Defense, he would have his detail. Hopefully, there was an understanding and there was good communication, so there was no problem. But we didn't operate too much with active duty SEALs, unfortunately. Most of those guys were doing missions, covert missions, on a different schedule, within a small group, in a different environment often. Oftentimes we were not operating at night. We were doing daily, during the day patrols, or, carrying out, transits during the day in order to bring them to go see someone.
Okay. Now, is not operating at night, was that in case of a possible threat that could happen within the area, or was that just because it did not want to operate at night?
That was just his schedule. He's not going to meet with the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Education at night. It wasn't a covert mission. It was a protection mission. And, it's just the same thing if you're out here on a security detail for a U.S. congressman. They're not operating at night. They're not doing meetings at night often. It is a war zone out there, and unfortunately that's the biggest challenge for us too, is that, one, we were a big protection detail, and two, we were operating mostly during the day.
So, after that happened, now that, I know that they say that private security has upped. It's become more prevalent, especially with military missions. Is that something that you agree with? Now, I know that a lot of the time, military contractors and private security, they like them to be former special forces, but I know that we're seeing some that were regular civilians and go through a training. Is that something you agree with or disagree with?
Well, the problem is that you don't have enough special forces to take on that role, because contractors, there's so many opportunities within, that line of work now. You just don't have enough former Navy SEALs or special operations or soft guys, to fulfill those spots that need to be done overseas. So to be honest with you, do you have to be a SEAL in order to conduct those missions? No, I don't think so. If you are a police officer and you're going to go through very similar training that we went through before we went overseas. So if you possess the skills that they feel confident that you can carry out the mission overseas, there's a lot of guys that I met that weren't SEALs or special operations that did really well. And I saw that transition because I got shot in Iraq, and I stopped doing the overseas security work, and I became an instructor. So I worked for Triple Canopy as an instructor in Virginia. And when I was out there was a huge need for contractors overseas. So the upper chain of command said, how are we going to get these guys on the ground? How are we going to be able to secure these contracts? Well, they didn't, so to speak, lower the standards. They just opened the scope to train people that didn't have that special operations background and make sure the training was thorough enough where they were confident to send them overseas and carry out that same mission. Now, the thing is the times that guys are getting into firefights, they weren't as often as you would think. So as long as these guys were conducting the mission and they were head smart and they work good as a team and they understand their roles and responsibilities and they understand the rules of rules of engagement, and they acted like they should during fire maneuver drills. They were confident to put them overseas. And again, it takes really good leadership. If you have good leadership and these guys are training often and they're being mentored by some of the special operations leadership that's over there, I agree that they can carry out that mission as well.
So, not to stray and dive into politics, because I know that's something that no one ever really wants to talk to. It seems like, but I always love to hear what men like yourself have to say in regards to political stuff going on within the country and out of the country. First off, I'd like to ask, what are your thoughts on Ryan Zink? He's now the new Interior Secretary. I'm sure that's something that's great. I'm a fan of him I'm a fan of him for starters.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I'm glad to see that these guys that have these backgrounds are taking on these roles. I'm from that same brotherhood, therefore I welcome it. And he is not a career politician. He's a guy who's proven, in the military. So I'm much more confident having someone like that in charge than, these career politicians. So I am not a person that talks often about politics. And, you'll see a lot of guys that are in the military or talk to a lot of guys that maybe were in the military. We're wired a little bit differently. I put my trust in leadership. Now, I might not agree with the commanding officer of SEAL Team 1 in some kind of training exercise that we do, but he's the one in charge. We put our trust in him. We respect his leadership, and we carry out the mission. We make sure that our teammates are safe. We make sure we conduct our business safe, and we hope for the best.
And I can't agree more with that. Just from me being a regular civilian, I 110% agree that putting trust in someone who has dealt with situations and scenarios that are life-threatening in countries that our government has focus in is the best thing that anyone could want. I feel like in society today, more people are going to talk about something, and rant on and ramble about something that really they've never experienced and will never experience. But it's always the people who have experienced it that they don't want to listen to and have seen it firsthand. And that's something I don't understand.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But, I don't get caught up in politics too much. I watch the news and I read the paper and, I keep myself informed, but I still go on every day doing what I believe is best. And I try and make a difference for the people I'm around, and I try and instill those values that I've learned and try and make a difference on my own, because I know I'm not going to change the world.
Yes. Now, what is, after getting out of private security, you did say that you started doing the SEAL Mentor. Is there any big stuff in store for you next?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's funny because everybody thinks I'm crazy for leaving the job and not having something lined up. But I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm going to be 44 this month, and I embrace challenge.
Wow, that's great. And you know what? I just can't even begin to explain how awesome that is to hear, because you guys, it's just amazing how the wiring and how you said as well, are wired differently. And that's full on 120% accurate. You guys are the warrior elite. And is that something that you feel where you could just go to a next step and maybe not have a set in stone plan, but you're going to find something and make it happen?
Yeah, I just like my brothers, the guys that have been through this program, we make things work. We don't talk a lot about stuff. We feel, hey, if it's time to move on from what we've been doing, and maybe there's not a set plan in place, we still have the confidence to move on and, persevere. We've been through some really challenging times. And, most of us, we don't like to get, stuck in some kind of environment where we're doing the same thing over and over again. At least, I've been doing the same job, and it's bittersweet for me because I loved it. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and it's been great. And we developed this mentor program to where I feel we're sending a better product to the schoolhouse to become SEALs. But, I think it was time for me to move on, give the reins to another SEAL who the next guy who's taken on this role is great, and I wish him all the best. But I'm ready to move on to something else, and I'm excited. I'm not nervous. I'm not anxious. I'm excited. My goal is to get back out to San Diego and start something new.
And I wish you the best of luck. And it's been such a pleasure hearing your story, Steve, and it's amazing. And that's exactly why I love this so much, is because listening to a man like yourself who has been through the training and who has gone through the pain knows the best. And a lot of people are never going to understand that. And that's an all-out shame. But I do have one question for you before we close out. I know how you just said, don't talk a lot about being a Navy SEAL or operations conducted. When you were a Navy SEAL, did you ever have a friend, back home who asked you, are you a Navy SEAL, where you didn't say that you were? Or, is it to keep it completely on lockdown the entire time you're active in the teams?
No, it was more of not talking about what you actually did in the job. And to be honest with you, once I left here, I didn't look back. The only people I kept in contact was my family, mostly because I had a new family. Most of the people I knew here, I didn't have a strong contact with or relationship with because they didn't add any real value to my life and didn't really support my efforts. They knew. There was talk about it, and some people were confused and unsure about whether or not it was true. And to be honest with you, I didn't care, and I didn't need to prove it. I was happy where I was, and I couldn't wait to get back to, San Diego and continue on training with my teammates. So, you're in a different world when you're in the teams. You're in a bubble, and you're kind of like oblivious to what's going on outside of that bubble, because you're so focused on what you're doing with your teammates and the training and the mission and, getting ready for, trips that you have coming up, getting ready for your deployment that's coming up. You don't have time for the BS. You really don't. And it's a great place to be, and it's a great mindset to be in. And as a young man who has a drive to do something like that, I tell you, there's nothing like it. You're not going to find it in the fire department. You're not going to find it in the police. You're not going to find it in any thing that you think maybe can kind of mirror that same kind of program or training or experience. Because I've looked high and low after I got out.
Wow, so it's just to just do it.
That's all that's in there.
Yeah. Wow. And that's, I believe in that 100%. You guys do so much and go through so much only to climb to the next step, to reach the next building block. And you keep going and keep pushing forward. And that's why you guys are the best of the best and the Warrior Elite. And, I really just want to say thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you on Patriots Corner. It's been such an honor, and you've done so much for the country, and I thank you for your military service and for your time, sir.
Hey, Matt, just one thing before I go. So if you get some good listeners that maybe have an interest in going into special operations, I'd like to share something, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So my time as the mentor, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of young men that are looking for the secret sauce. They're looking for the perfect training plan. They're looking for the perfect path in order to become a SEAL, and what they really want to know when they come to our program. And there isn't, and then what it comes down to is hard work. And that's all it comes down to, is being committed and being willing to put in the time, but going forward and never looking back, and I wish, considering the times that the kids are growing up, is very challenging for them, because there's a lot of white noise out there, and there's a lot of things to get distracted. And because they have information, at their fingertips, they're always looking for the next best thing. They're always looking for that, like I said before, the training program that's going to get them through. Nothing's going to get them through the best training program. There's nothing out there, that's going to replace what I said before. It's just hard work and being committed and just going for it. So for those out there that are interested in going into the SEAL program or any Special Forces program, that's what I can tell you, is just get after it, stop second-guessing yourself, and just be committed to the program and trust in yourself, and you'll be successful.
Great. And that's amazing. And that, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Steve, and thank you so much for being on Patriots Corner. It was a true honor, and good luck with everything. It's been such an honor to speak with you, sir.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was just former Navy SEAL Steve Prescia. Steve, thank you so much. Shout out to you for speaking on Patriots Corner today. It was such an honor to have you, and God bless, and thank you for your military service. All right, that was Matt and Steve with Patriots Corner. Take care and have a great night, guys.